Historic Cherry Hill is absolutely bursting with fascinating objects, people, and stories. Not surprising, I suppose, considering that before it began its life as a historic house museum, Cherry Hill was home to 5 generations of one family, the Van Rensselaers, a family of merchants, military men, missionaries, lawyers, aristocrats, scientists, impeccable record keepers, and mind-blowing pack rats. Over their 5 generations, the Cherry Hill Van Rensselaers accumulated 20,000 objects, 30,000 manuscripts, 7,500 textiles, 5,000 books, and 3,000 photographs. Not only does every object at Cherry Hill have a story to tell, each object is often ensconced in a web of connection to other objects, manuscripts, and photographs. Taken together, they weave a brilliant tapestry and illuminate the faces of Cherry Hill's yesteryear. Hi, I'm Deborah Emmons-Andarawis, Curator at Historic Cherry Hill, and this is a Chinese lacquer work table that is connected to at least 3 different people who lived here at Cherry Hill. Catherine Van Rensselaer-Bonny bought it in China around 1860 and gave it to her niece, Harriet Van Rensselaer-Elmendorf. Some 60 years later, a younger cousin, Catherine Rankin, displayed it in her Cherry Hill parlor. But what did this work table mean to each of these Van Rensselaer women? Catherine Van Rensselaer-Bonny was the granddaughter of Philip and Maria Van Rensselaer, Cherry Hill's first owners. In 1856, Catherine and her husband Samuel traveled to China, to Canton and Macau as missionaries. Cherry Hill's collection includes a scrapbook compiled by Catherine during her 11 missionary years. As a missionary, Catherine would have been fairly immersed in Chinese culture. But just how immersed was she? What was Catherine Bonny's Canton like? There's actually a long history of Western presence in Canton because of the China trade. From the 17th century, Western markets eagerly sought Chinese trade goods, such as porcelain and silk. But trade with the West was tightly controlled by the Chinese imperial government, and until the 1840s, all Western export was funneled through the port at Canton. Because of this concentration of trade at Canton, a pseudo-Western community developed on the city's outskirts, and Canton became one of the world's major shopping centers. And Catherine Bonny did shop. Although Catherine did buy many items available to the West, she also purchased a variety of luxury goods not widely available or widely affordable to Western markets. She purchased a preponderance of rose mandarin wares and finely carved ivory articles. The chess pieces of this lacquer game board are carved ivory. And so are all the fittings of this lacquer sewing table. A woman of refined tastes from an elite family of shrinking means, Catherine availed herself of the fine luxury goods available in one of the world's shopping capitals, and these goods were more affordable because she was buying them directly. She was also purchasing them as tokens of her foreign travels, a piece of china to send back to loved ones at home. But was this really a piece of china? How Chinese was this sewing table really? The China trade was characterized by a design exchange between East and West. Chinese techniques were applied to forms from the Western market, and Chinese designs also inspired Western decoration. This lacquer work table is a classic example of Chinese ornament being integrated onto a Western form, the sewing table. What is Chinese about it is the carved dragon feet, the gold decoration, and of course the lacquer. Lacquer comes from the sap of an Asian sumac tree, which is applied to the wood base in thin layers of increasing refinement. The lacquer polymerizes in contact with moist air, creating a hard, glossy surface. Lacquer with gold decoration was so prized in the West that it inspired the technique of japanning, a type of decorative furniture painting. So what did this work table mean to Harriet, or Hattie, van Rensselaer-Elmendorf? This sewing table was commissioned for Catherine Bonney's niece, Hattie, and bears her monogram. It comes with all the requisite sewing accoutrements. But did Hattie ever use it? Our guess is probably not. The inside of the sewing table is pristine, and the beautiful ivory fittings bear no marks of use. In fact, the only obvious wear marks are on the outside of the table, from objects being placed on top of it. A coffee ring, perhaps? In this 1880s photograph of Cherry Hill's parlor, the sewing table can be seen, proudly displayed in the home's most formal room, but not particularly accessible for use. It seems to have objects displayed on top of it. Other items purchased by Catherine Bonney are also visible in this photo, including the rose mandarin punch bowl and temple jars displayed on top of the piano, which was also evidently being used as a whatnot rather than for its functional purpose. For Hattie, the sewing table was a prized display item, and it fit in perfectly with Victorian taste for eclecticism and glut. 60 years later, what did this table mean to Catherine Rankin, Cherry Hill's fourth-generation Van Rensselaer owner? Well, Catherine was part of New York's old elite that found itself being undermined politically and economically by the new millionaires from above and the wave of immigrants from below. She looked to the colonial past as a better, more refined time, and she saw her own ancestors as exemplars and true Americans. The family nearly lost Cherry Hill due to economic distress, but Catherine married a rising lawyer who saved the day. Once Catherine came into ownership of Cherry Hill, she set about recreating her vision of her colonial home, a colonial revival vision. This photograph of Cherry Hill's parlor was taken in the 1940s, by which time Catherine had fully implemented her colonial revival overhaul, and there is still a place for the Chinese lacquer work table in Catherine's parlor. But yet another meaning is applied. Catherine and her ilk railed against modern life of a commonplace and unlovely sort. She revered her colonial past, but also followed the arts and crafts movement and admired what she saw as the simplicity of the Chinese craftsman and the quality of his workmanship, qualities that she found lacking in her own commonplace and unlovely world. Like so many of the thousands of objects at Cherry Hill, the lacquer work table, like the process that made it, adds rich layer upon layer to one Albany family's story.